Maladaptive perfectionism, obsession with getting things right, ruminating when you think you've gotten something wrong, holding yourself to just impossibly high standards. I call it being your own worst enemy. And a lot of high achievers do it by habit. I'm Morra Aarons-Mele, and this is The Anxious Achiever, the show that looks at the intersection of mental health and work and asks, how can we do it all better? So my guest today has a pretty fancy resume. A lot of people who come on the show have pretty fancy resumes. Jordana Confino has a JD from Yale Law School and a BA in psychology from Yale. She has all kinds of certifications in positive psychology, and she is a recovering, overachieving perfectionist. The thing is, she says she's really not alone among lawyers, and that's what she studies now. When Jordana tells you her story, you might nod your head, think about it. How many times have you beaten yourself up as a way of keeping yourself motivated to keep winning or do your best work? It works. It works. Except that it's slowly draining our battery and taking us to a very dark and unjoyful place. We're all anxious achievers wrestling with our perfectionism every day. We may not be perfectionistic about everything. There are certain things that I am totally a slob about. But the inner dialogue with my enemy is perhaps one of the most constant relationships in my life. I don't really want to be my enemy anymore. And I love how Jordana's take allows us to continue to crush it and be awesome, but maybe be a little more of our own best friend and not our enemy. Jordana, welcome. I'm excited to talk to you. I have your study printed out, and I really, it was great to see. It was actually great to see data, again, confirming with so much of what we know. I'm always excited to actually see data. So thank you for doing it. So today I want to talk a little bit about your journey to positive lawyering, which you teach. I think that's amazing. I want to hear about that. I want to go through some of the aspects of maladaptive perfectionism that you highlight in your study. And then I want you, with me, we're going to get practical. And we're going to talk through two of the barriers that I hear from lawyers, and actually a lot of professional services folks, when I go in to talk to them, which is every minute of my time is accounted for, well-being, boundaries, all that, forget it. And um, expectations, the weight of expectations. The client wants what the client wants. There's no way I can say no. The partner is going to never say no. So it's going to trickle down to me, yada, yada, yada. So we'll do a little bit of maybe some coaching, or you'll help us talk about that. How's that sound good?
Fabulous.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay. Well, okay. So I'm just gonna read a little bit just to orient the listener. A JD from Yale Law School, a BA in psychology from Yale, um, 2 federal judicial clerkships, and former adjunct law professor of the year award at Fordham. You said to me that you've never heard a podcast title that resonated with you more strongly than The Anxious Achiever. Your blog was called Chronicles of a Recovering Type A plus, not just type A plus perfectionist.
Yes. Yes. It was funny when my massage therapist felt my shoulders. He's like, girl, you are type A plus. And he was right. And that was in law school, by the way. And it's stuck ever since.
That's amazing. Type A plus. So talk about what inhabiting anxious achieverhood means for you.
Oh, gosh. For me, it basically describes my entire life up until about 10 years ago when the wheels started turning. And what it has meant to me is basically hustling hard, harder than most people think they could, in order to prove my worth and trying to feel good enough and worthy and prove to others that I am valuable and prove to myself that I'm valuable. And I've come to recognize that that really, I think, is the essence of perfectionism. Maladaptive perfectionism will go into it because it's this continuous pursuit of achievement, but not for the sake of something that is intrinsically driven at all. At least for me and for maladaptive perfectionists, it's really running away from fear. So I like to say
Mm.
perfectionists are never playing to win, they're always playing not to lose. And that can work really, really well for a time. And in my case, as I know is in the case of most people, it stops working or the cost becomes so high that it becomes debilitating unless you learn how to harness your anxiety and pursue achievement in a different way and change that relationship, which is now what I'm trying to help others do as I believe you are as well.
Yes, and, one of the things that I think is tricky about a lot of anxious achieving is that it is extrinsically motivated, but it's not 100% extrinsically motivated, that there is something in us that is I call us seekers. We
Mhm.
seek. We seek to get better. We seek to solve problems. We seek to, help the world. Like, we're very attuned to what's going on. So, I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't like to say I'm only doing it for the trophies because I don't think that's accurate either.
And this is somewhere where I am going to so respectfully quibble with your
Tell
position
me.
on this
Tell me.
because I don't think that it is the anxiety that is making us seek. I think that many, many, many anxious achievers are seekers. And we have this super strong anxiety. That's the fear. And I truly
Mm,
believe that it is not the fear that is propelling us forward. I believe that there is something else that could be propelling us forward. And it is when the fear overtakes that and starts running the show that it can actually eclipse our seeking and ironically end up holding us back because we believe that the fear is what's driving us forward. And so what I'm always trying to explain to people is you got here despite the perfectionism or despite the anxiety, not because of it. And if you can learn how to, and maybe temper that fear and change your relationship with it, you will still have that striving and that fire in you. It will just be coming from a different place and it'll actually be much more effective than when the fear is just running the show.
mhm. I think that we're actually saying the same thing, but I also I wanna this is so pathetic, but it's like I kinda wanna protect anxiety a little bit because I
Yeah.
think that it is I think and again, there's no science that I have ever found behind this, but, like, the anxiety is a piece of the seeking, and you need to have a relationship with your anxiety. I don't think it's realistic to tell people, "We're gonna make you an unanxious
Oh my
person
gosh.
who
No,
doesn't
no, no,
have
no, no.
perfectionistic tendencies," right? So, that's the nuance. It's like, you're in relationship with your anxiety. It's not driving the bus.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely, and that's actually something that I always warn people. I say, "Don't try to perfect your perfectionism recovery, because
Exactly.
if you do, you'll give up immediately because we're not making the anxiety, we're not making the inner critic, we're not making the inner drill sergeant, all of those thoughts. We can't just banish them." And I say anyone who tells you that they can, they're lying to you or about to give you the strongest sedative that's gonna knock you out from
Right,
all
right.
thoughts and feelings. But it's changing the relationship with them and recognizing it's like, "Oh, you can be here, and I can examine you without necessarily heeding every one of your directives." And so when I think about the anxious achiever and I say it's just the hustling to prove your worth, that is the anxious achiever who's handed over the steering wheel
Right.
to the anxiety.
Anxiety is
Um,
driving white knuckled like, "Ah!" Well, no,
exact
and anxiety is saying, as is perfectionism, "Stop, we're scared, we can't do this," right? Instead of saying, "Anxiety is an adaptive response here, we're gonna
Yep,
go for it." Yeah, okay, I think
absolutely.
we're saying the same thing.
Oh, we are. It's just it's all the terminology, and it's so funny. There's a fabulous book out, I think it's The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control, and she says, "Oh no, perfectionism is excellent." And when I say no, we want to do perfectionism recovery, we're saying the exact same thing. I'm just sh- referring to maladaptive perfectionism as perfectionism
We'll
versus
talk about that
yeah,
maladaptive perfectionism versus
absolutely. So when and the reason that I boil it down to perfectionism is because I feel like, especially in the legal profession, perfectionism is so glorified and has so long been glorified
Mhm.
that many people won't be able to deal with the nuance of adaptive perfectionism and maladaptive perfectionism. So what I'm trying to do is just, okay, all right, let's just call maladaptive perfectionism, and let's distinguish that from sustainable excellence, or what I like to call big picture perfection seeking. So
Mhm.
what perfectionism is not is drive, determination, striving for excellence, meticulous attention to detail. All of those positive qualities, that is not the essence of perfectionism, because people who pursue sustainable excellence or big picture perfection seekers, they can have all those things. What distinguishes perfectionism from big picture perfection seeking is that it is driven by fear and shame based motivation, and it is rejecting realistic constraints
Mhm.
on time, energy, output, human capacity, and also using self-criticism and self-doubt as motivating forces. And so just to break that down, if we talk with the reality, a big picture perfection seeker, and I say big picture perfection seeking, meaning striving for the best possible attainable outcome that's actually possible under the given circumstances. So we are accepting that there are constraints on the best possible outcome that is actually attainable. And that if you are asked to do 30 hours of work in 10 hours, you cannot do every single aspect of it 100% perfectly. If you accept that, then you are able to optimize. You're able to decide, all right, how do I want to strategically allocate
Right.
my efforts here in order to achieve the best possible overall outcome, whatever that is, as opposed to saying, if I'm just good enough, if I just work hard enough, I should be able to make the impossible possible. So that is one distinction there. Again, then there's the underlying motivation, which I mentioned earlier. So are we striving to prove our worth and avoid feeling some added layer of shame or embarrassment or, insecurity or anxiety than we're already carrying around?
Or
Yeah,
it's just a habit.
that too.
We're doing what we've always done, and look where it's gotten us, so we better keep doing it.
That too. And that's another thing for people that I always say. I mean, and it's interesting because I feel like perfectionism works really well, like I said at first, and then it stops working either because you're burning yourself out or because the stakes are getting higher. So, for instance, when I was in college, the way that I would describe myself as the little engine that could. So I said, you know, of course, it often goes hand in hand with imposter syndrome. So I somehow snuck into Yale and I'm way less smart than everyone around me, but I'm doing better because I'm willing to work 3 times as hard as them. Well, that worked really well in college when the quantity of work, it was possible to work three
Yeah.
times harder. In law school, when there was more material than could ever possibly be read, I couldn't work 3 times harder. And at a certain point, that stops becoming possible in that way. But we think in order to do something well enough, I have to do it to death because I've always done it to death before. And it's almost like this faulty logic where we think if I've done it this way and the outcome has been good, it must mean that I must keep doing it this way. And we don't realize, like, oh, we could actually do it
It's our good
different.
luck
And
charm.
the
It's like
outcome would actually
yes,
be
it's
the
like that
same.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. And then the last piece, just going back to distinguishing maladaptive perfectionism from big picture perfection seeking, how we are motivating ourselves. So perfectionists are ruthlessly self-critical. So we're effectively trying to blame and shame ourselves into peak performance. If we make a mistake or if we're scared that we're not going to perform, we just beat ourselves further. And this was actually in my own story. I remember when my second and heretofore final well-being breakdown, my I remember my therapist saying to me, "Jordana, if you had a racehorse that had just broken down from exhaustion, would you just keep whipping it to try to get it up to run faster?" And I was like, "No, obviously not." And she's like, "Why are you doing that to yourself?" And that's what perfectionists do, though. We beat ourselves up when we make a mistake, and we also beat ourselves to try to just do better. And the crazy part is, and I actually think the really empowering part, and thank goodness for it, there is so much compelling neuroscience now showing that tearing ourselves to shreds in that way actually hinders our cognitive processing and performance. And going back to the first thing you said when you opened this, saying, "I'm so glad there's data." Thank goodness there's data, because I would not have believed all of everything that I feel like we're gonna be talking about is gonna be so, so, so counterintuitive for so many of the anxious achievers who haven't heard this before and the perfectionists who haven't heard this before. And I think for many people, it requires hard, irrefutable data to even open their mind to the possibility that this could be true and that everything won't go down the tubes if they start relating to their fear and their striving slightly
Mhm.
differently.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It's so powerful, right? How do you go from being your own worst enemy to your best friend without that worry that you're gonna lose your edge? I mean, one of
Yeah.
the things that was I'm sorry. I wanted to just ask you, one of the things that was really interesting in your study was actually, 2 facts that I thought were really unusual and
Yeah.
surprising, which is that, actually, perfectionists lawyers, and you'll
Mhm.
talk about how you scored them, were less ambitious,
Yeah.
and lawyers with low perfectionism scores express significantly stronger aspirations to do amazing things with my life than those with higher perfectionism scores. Talk about that. Did that surprise you in the data?
So it's interesting because that was a notable finding, and that correlation wasn't as strong as some of the other findings that we had, but it was slight, but it was there. And actually it really doesn't, because it goes back to me again to that not playing to win, but rather playing not to lose. And I think perfectionism often goes very much hand in hand with imposter syndrome as well. And it's less about aspiring for what you want for yourself and so much more about proving and pleasing. And I
Mm,
think that we also saw that perfectionism was linked with lower levels of engagement. And so, again, even if at the beginning there is that ambition, I think that perfectionism over time starts to kill the soul of so seriously, and I'm
it
saying, and
does.
if again, if left unaddressed, because it sucks all of the passion and the drive out of you, and again, you can keep still running because of the fear, but once you suck that passion out, it starts eating away at you from the inside, both mentally, physically, emotionally, socially, like, in every way. That then I it makes sense to me. Those numbers do make sense to me, I think.
I think so. I mean, I think one of the things that I thought was really interesting too is that your perfectionists were more competitive. They were goal oriented and like, yes.
Win at any cost, that
Mhm.
was the measure there, and that's also really interesting because, again, let's talk about the legal profession in particular. The way that am now able to deliver CLEs for lawyers on this getting the coveted ethics credit is because the normal, or I would say the most popular understanding is that, oh, perfectionism is necessary in order to deliver perfect client work product. So it's actually a professional responsibility to be perfectionist. And actually, while that sounds like it makes sense, perfectionists, again, we're not actually producing everything perfectly 100% of the time because that is literally impossible. What
Right.
perfectionists are more likely to do is cover up mistakes in order to be
Ah,
able to appear perfect or to do something unethical in order to win at any
mm,
cost,
mm,
because deep at the heart of perfectionism is fixed mindset. And so, fixed mindset, we're focused on performance goals, not learning goals or, morality goals. And we can take morality out of law in general because, that's not our mission necessarily, depending on who the lawyer is. But I think, again, it's that desperation not to lose that leads to winning at any cost, even if not doing so in the right way. And I think then this is what I often say to when big law firms say, well, how could we tell people that perfectionism is bad? We need everything to be perfect. And again, going back to the research, Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety, telling people that mistakes can't happen does not prevent them from happening. It prevents them from being surfaced so that they can be corrected and that so people can learn from them. So if we're creating cultures where we tell people mistakes can never happen, again, like that is actually going to result in worse quality work and bigger blowups because they won't have the courage to go to people and elevate those mistakes and correct them before they become client calamities.
mhm. I think that that's something that's really important in your work is that you're saying, "Look, this isn't about us feeling." I mean, you are saying it is about us feeling better. It's about us being less depressed. Your perfectionists in your study showed greater stress levels,
Yep.
unsurprising. They showed greater depression levels, unsurprising to me. But it's also the fact that it's just not going to create the work product.
Absolutely, and that is always when I'm presenting or delivering this message to organizational leaders to try to allow me to bring this information to their people and bring these tools to their people. That's always what I'm talking about. And for many of the individuals as well, because when I needed this information the most, when I was a raging overachiever, perfectionist, lawyer, and law student, I would not have gone to the program on well-being or how to be happier or how to be healthier. I was horribly unhappy and unhealthy, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be successful, and I viewed those things as mutually exclusive. And so, yes, there are some law firm leaders who care about their people's well-being as a humanitarian issue, but that's not what is going to move the needle. And so that was why I felt so strongly that we need to, yes, we'll bring them the well-being data along with us because it's super powerful and some people do care about that. And yes, it will be a nice byproduct of addressing these issues. But in terms of performance, profitability, client service, all of those things, it is important there as well. And because that's what I think is going to be necessary to secure buy-in, that and lawyer specific data, because as you said, there's
Mm.
lots of research on, mere mortals or the general population. But lawyers think that they're special. And also they think that they're unique in terms of the constraints imposed on them. And so we felt that it was really important to show, yes, this is true for lawyers as well. And we are actually not doing our firms or organizations a service by ignoring this evidence.
I think I just wanna just sort of dial in on what you just said. It's instructive to anybody listening who's trying to get a workplace mental health program started, who's trying to create this conversation in their company. When I have spoken at law firms about well-being and mental health at work, nobody comes. It's
Yep.
so upsetting to me. And then I kinda realized, like, it's not actually me. It's like, how could I give up precious billable time on something that just doesn't matter? And so I think it's that reframe, it's that mindset shift, like, in my presentations, I now show a photo of LeBron. I'm like, "Do you wanna be like LeBron? Okay, yes, we all wanna be like LeBron, right?"
Yeah.
And and I think that's the shift. Tell me why lawyers A, think they're so special, and B, are actually almost predisposed towards being anxious achievers and being, perfectionistic.
Absolutely. So lawyers think they're special. Oh gosh. Well, I mean, it is I would say it's one of the professions that it really takes up people's identity. So no one says, "Oh, I practice law." It's like, "I am a lawyer. It's who I am. It's not what I do." That is one thing that I think is very strong among lawyers, but also, as you said, the constraints of the legal profession and the setup of it, billing in 6-minute increments,
Can't imagine.
working in a setting where literally the presence or absence of a comma could make or break your case or your client's matter. The heightened need for precision and, immediate responsiveness and all of these different things, I think, make it seem really plausible that actually, no, we are doing something different. Also, I mean, the lawyers perceive themselves as needing to completely separate logic from emotion and feelings and all of those other sorts of things, and really just being hyper focused, hyper rational, hyper driven in order to deliver this excellence. And then honestly, I just think it's part of the kind of culture that goes lawyers. It's so fascinating to me because they even when it comes to delivering well-being and peak performance education, and so you have great public appeal, but often lawyers will say, "Oh, no, no, I only wanna learn from a lawyer," because if they're not a lawyer, they don't get it, and when I'm, "Oh, and
Yeah. Oh,
I
I
am
hear
a
that. I
lawyer."
hear that all the time. I'm like, "Fine. It's okay."
But it drives me crazy because I'm like, "But lawyers are terrible at the skills that so many other people are trying to teach you that it makes no sense." But yeah, lawyers think that they are special and unique. They also have personality types that drive them or pull them towards the law. So Larry Richards has done some great research on the lawyer personality. And what he's found is that they're super high in skepticism, which then
Mm.
is fortified in law school, which is basically a 3-year crash course in spotting every possible mistake and flaw and anticipating everything that could possibly go wrong. So then we're bringing
Anxiety.
that outwards. Anxiety, exactly. We're super high in urgency. So again, this goes
No.
with anxiety. We can't sit with uncertainty or not knowing. We're impatient. It goes hand in hand with anxiety right there. Low in sociability, which also
Hmm.
social connection is a stress and anxiety buffering property. And so that's an interesting play there. More autonomous. So we feel like we need to handle things ourselves rather than seeking or accepting help outwards. And so all of these characteristics really fit perfectly with perfectionism and anxious achieving. And then again, going back to the model of law school, it is like the opposite of a culture that promotes growth mindset, which growth
Even
mindset,
still, even still.
even still, 100%. I mean, they're trying to make little changes. Most classes are you have a final exam, it's your grade. That's your GPA, it defines your worth. There's 0 assignments, 0 opportunity for feedback except for the legal research and writing class. And you just study for the test, you get your grade at the end. And it's amazing because when I'm working with new associates, they get feedback. Inevitably, they will all get feedback on the first thing they turn in and everything after that. And they are devastated because they have not had the opportunity to learn that
Mm,
feedback is how you grow, and that when you turn something in, it's generally the start of a conversation and a process, not that you're being graded on every single thing. Also, the curve in law school. So you're getting no feedback, and then you're graded on a curve where you're being directly compared to your peers. And if they do well, you do worse. It is literally a zero sum game. So all of these things are just, I'm like a pressure cooker that then amplifies already these personality predispositions that really set law students up for heightened anxiety, heightened depression, heightened perfectionism. And it's interesting because research is done showing, yes, these personality traits in lawyers But there was a study done that showed that law students have the same levels of depression, anxiety as members of the general population in their first year. And then they see a rapid increase during the first year that then continues to increase through the second and third year. And so I was working in legal education for a long time. That was where I started doing this work, saying we have a moral imperative as the law schools to start looking like, what are we? It is not that the students are showing up depressed and anxious. Yes, they have these personality traits that could be predisposing them, but this is happening while they're here. And what are we doing to them? And how can we start undoing it without
Unlearning.
unlearning without making them bad lawyers? And there is a way, but we have to be opening their eyes to the neural connections and the patterns of thought that we're fortifying and help show them how we can undo it. There are also some structural things that I think need to go in order to have a healthier and higher performing profession. So the billable hour has to go and the curve in law school has to go. I don't talk about that generally because I don't think that either of those things is gonna happen anytime soon, and so when I talk about perfectionism and I'm talking to organizations and individuals, what can we do? I don't even throw that out there because when you throw that out there, many people will be like, "All right, she's got nothing helpful." Talk
Right.
about practical steps that actually could be achieved, but those are 2 huge things that without changing them, we will never be able to fully reform the culture of the legal profession.
Jordana, I wanna talk a little bit about the tools that you use, but let's get to the heart of the matter right now, which is billable hours, client expectations, and the zero-sum nature of what it seems to me is the promotion cycle in law firms, and this is true in this is true in big consulting, this is true elsewhere. Why do big firms now, and I don't know if small firms do, bill in six-minute increments, and what is the answer to achieving any kind of grounding, well-being, taking space, taking time? I mean, how do you even go to the bathroom? What do you do when you have to go to the bathroom?
Well, it's a great question. Are you thinking about the client matter while you pee? Because if so, maybe you can bill. Actually, these are the types of questions I get from my junior associates for real. And it's so interesting because when you look at the billable hour targets, and it varies by firms, but many of them are above 2,000 per year. And then you have to explain to associates, okay, if you're billing 8 hours a day, that means you're working at least 10 to 12 hours a day
Right.
because you're not billing all of your time. Why? Honestly, I don't know. I I don't know how it first came to be. It is a way for billing that is very lucrative for
Clearly.
big law firms because they have the army of associates that just are churning out work. A lot of it is like doc review and due diligence. And actually, I take back what I said before, but I don't know if the billable hour model is ever going to change because AI might actually change this. This is actually something because all of those tasks that take thousands upon thousands and then thousands of hours of associate work, probably can be done right now by some tools out there. And soon clients will be demanding that. But it seems to be that the only reason it's done right now is because that's the way it's always been, and I put that in quotes because that's the answer for so many things in a legal profession, and it's extremely lucrative for the big firms. How do you operate in that? So, this is where I think going back to the big picture perfection seeking becomes helpful because yes, they want you to be billing more hours. And yes, they want you to be saying yes to every opportunity that comes in the door. It's funny, a lot of firms have a stoplight system. So if you, it's a way that associates signal whether they're at capacity or if they can take on more work or if they're really slow. So you're on green if you're slow and you can take on more work. You're on orange if like you're pretty at capacity and you're at red if you're like, I'm drowning and I can't take anything on. Most
And let me just ask you a quick question. So, is it admirable to be on red?
so
Like, do you
here's
wanna be on red?
here's what I'm gonna say. Most associates are told, "You should really always be on green." And so it's a total farce. It's a total, total farce. And, like, they are told basically you should always, at many places, not all, but basically you should always say yes. And so again, we're being told we want to build the most hours, we want to say yes always. However, what I say to them is, and you are also being assessed on the quality of the work that you produce. And there's a real constraint there where it becomes, this is where reality comes into play. It is impossible to vastly overextend yourself and do everything really well. It just becomes physically impossible, especially once you get sleep deprived, sick, et cetera, et cetera. And so if you are going to be disappointing someone somewhere, is it better or worse to disappoint someone by saying, "Oh no, I can't do this," or "I'm really on red right now," or to disappoint them and be dinged on the other end where they say, "Oh, she does sloppy work product," or "She
Right.
missed the deadline." And actually, I would say that all in all, it's much worse to have bad work product or to miss a deadline because no one's looking at that saying, "Oh, so and so was overextended." And all of the partners who I talk to now who are successful and happy, including in the big law firms, say, "I used to think that I would never do well here if I didn't draw boundaries. And now I know that the only reason I've been able to succeed here long term is because I learned to draw those boundaries." Also, talk about 6-minute increments. This is one of the reasons why the billable hour makes no sense. It rewards inefficiency in a
Mhm.
way, and yet you're still being asked to have quality work. And so one thing that this actually came through in the study, perfectionists don't get more work done. They actually get less work done. Have higher time management and productivity issues. One of the reasons is because perfectionism often, not for everyone, but for many people, goes hand in hand with procrastination
Yes,
because
and
you're
perseverating and ruminating
exactly
and
and reading the
all.
same email
Mhm.
that's one sentence long 100 times because of the anxiety that comes with sending it out. And so those characteristics can actually be really detrimental to both doing work well. Like so many people that get sent to me for coaching for time management issues, it's actually a perfectionism issue, not like that they don't know how to organize their time in theory. So there's one way. And then also, even if you can get through it as an associate, when you want to rise towards leadership, if you want to move towards partnership, it's going to really come to stand in your way because you have to be able to be willing to step outside your comfort zone,
Yeah.
to stretch yourself in certain ways, to do more creative work where you're actually adding value beyond just executing or replicating what someone else has said and done. And for someone that's so constrained by fear of doing something imperfectly, you won't be willing to do that. So you're almost condemning yourself to be this perfect associate worker bee who's going to be overlooked for the more senior leadership positions that you are hoping to make it to. And so, even within the confines of the legal profession, that can be a real barrier. And then also, let's just go back. I mentioned the neuroscience earlier. Let's take away everything else except for how you are trying to motivate yourself. So, that ruthless, ongoing monologue of your self-criticism and self-doubt that's going on in the background all day. If you can learn to recognize that that is hurting you rather than helping you and to change your relationship with that voice. Again, we are not getting rid of it, but we're learning how to see it, pick it up, give it a hug because we know that it is just so scared and anxious, but then let it know that we really need to focus on our work now and need to turn the volume down on it. If we can do that, we can still be operating in the exact same external constraints and be so much happier, healthier, and more productive. And that's why I love mindset work so much
Yeah.
because often there are actually like tangible steps that people can take vis-a-vis their external world and surroundings. But even if we don't touch any of those, if we change how we're engaging with that voice in our head, you can radically enhance your effectiveness and your well-being. And that's super powerful, even for someone working like in the most toxic
So
work
how would you
environment.
start? What's your favorite? Tell me your favorite. I mean, I love mindset as well.
Yeah.
Like if you're dealing, and I guess it's probably different if you're starting in your career versus your mid-level. But yeah, I mean, so I'm coming to you. Maybe I'm 32.
Okay.
And what if I've been progressing, where would I probably be at if I was a 32-year-old
If
woman?
you're 32 who went straight through
Straight to
from
law school.
college to law school, you would probably be a senior associate. So you're getting up there now on the cusp of either being elevated to partner in the next few years or leaving your big law firm. And so you're right at that point there. And it's interesting because if you were to ask me what tool, how to get started, this would be the same tool if you were a law student, if you were a first year associate, if you are a senior associate, if you're a partner, whatever, or if you're a retired partner who's now struggling to find meaning and purpose in life because your identity is no longer there, which is a huge,
Exactly.
huge issue.
Absolutely.
I am always telling my students, I want to give you every tool in my toolbox, but if I could only give you one, I would give you self compassion because I
Mm,
truly, truly, truly believe that it is the most powerful thing that you can do for yourself is to shape that relationship that you have with yourself and that voice in your head. And if you do not address that, you can make every other change and still be self sabotaging from the inside out and not achieve what you're trying to get for yourself. And so I would always start with self compassion. And the way, huge fan of Kristen Neff, but in the way that I like to do it is first just disentangling yourself from that inner critic and that inner drill sergeant or inner voice of self-doubt. And I'm a big fan of internal family systems as well, but which is very similar. But whatever that anxious or critical voice in your head is, learning to cultivate awareness of it, because for so many of us, we feel it all day, but we don't even really see it because it's just so ingrained in our thoughts. We just accept it as reality or who we are. So, beginning to cultivate your awareness of that critic, and it sounds silly, but I have all of my students and clients actually personify and draw that critic. And because the research shows that if you draw it,
yep,
and then when you notice those anxious thoughts popping up, you imagine them coming from this separate being, it helps create that psychological distance
yep.
that will then empower you to engage intentionally with that voice as opposed to just having it wash over you.
I have them give it a character. I guess
Yeah.
I'm not as artistic, but I will say, "Who is it?" And it's funny, sometimes people will be like, "It's my mom." And then sometimes people will be like, "It's just a bunch of stupid squirrels." You
Yeah.
know? It's
Yeah.
so funny.
Well, I love it, and so that's how we start, and then I tell them, "Actually draw it so you can imagine it," and then this is something it
I
makes so
love
many of
that.
them freak out because many of us are horrible artists. I certainly am, and then it's like then they're freaking out, like, "Well, I can't capture it the way in my head." I'm like, "Do it imperfectly. Draw it terribly. This is part of the process." And so then they have these and I show them my drawing is totally ridiculous. It's funny because mine also it's this it kind of looks like the Green Goblin from the Mucinex commercial, but not at all in my actual drawing of it, but it also distinctly reminds me of my mother, and it certainly has my mother's voice, but yet, if you look,
Yes.
it's a green blob on the screen. So just get them to then it's have that visualization for when it pops up, and then we're just practicing. At first, just practicing noticing it and being like, "Oh, hi, critic," or whatever you name it. "Hi, squirrels." And then the next step is showing it some love and just basically swooping it up, closing your eyes, swooping it up into a big hug, and really acknowledging and validating the underlying pain and terror and anxiety, all of the feelings, really just helping it, reassuring it that you see it and you understand where it's coming from. You know it's terrified, you know it's trying to help, and just helping to bring down that anxiety on a visceral level, just like helping to regulate your nervous system a little bit there.
Yeah.
Because if we're in
Yeah.
a state of fight or flight, We can't do any cognitive change here. So then once you notice that shift, then we just say, I know you're trying to help, but actually all you're doing is distracting me or stressing me out right now. So I'm going to need to turn the volume down on you. And you can actually imagine turning the volume down, or some of my clients like imagining putting them in a little phone booth, soundproof phone booth room, and then saying, now I'm going to redirect my thoughts. And then the last piece, and this is something that you do over time, is speaking to yourself more compassionately or giving yourself a more encouraging or constructive response. So again, Kristen F., what would you say to a dear friend or a
Yeah.
mentee in your shoes? And we don't need to be all lovey-dovey here. And I know that a lot of people, if you try to go lovey-dovey, you'll lose them. But if you just say, like, this is a totally human experience. Anyone could have made this mistake, and anyone would be feeling as awful as you are right now for doing this. But I know that you can do this and you can rebound from this. You're doing great, or whatever it is,
Yeah.
or just giving
Yeah.
yourself that constructive message, even when you don't believe it. And this is again where the science becomes really helpful. Neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is such a beautiful phenomenon, and I love that we have the brain imaging studies to show that it is possible to literally rewire your brain, because I think that a challenge that a lot of perfectionists have, the first major hump is they have to want to change. So they have to actually accept that this ruthless self-criticism, self-flagellation, self-doubt is not helping them. It's actually holding them back. And then they have to believe that they're capable of changing it, because it is, for most people, this is just the inner critic and the fear. It's just so deeply ingrained and embedded that they can't imagine a world where they could be engaging with it differently. And that is, I remember when I first learned about this stuff, I thought that I was spoiled goods. That's literally what I would say to my therapist, because
Oh,
I'm like, wow, I now understand that this perfectionism is harming me in so many ways, but it is so at the core essence of who I am, and I am powerless to intervene here. Like that inner drill sergeant is just driving this car. I don't even know where the keys are. I'm not even in the front seat with it. And then I learned about neuroplasticity and how if we practice thinking in different ways, even when we don't believe those thoughts a little bit, over time, they'll become easier and more instinctive. And we can't just banish the critic, but it's almost like we only have so much radio wavelength in our head that if we grow the self compassionate voice, which we can do simply by practicing it, it will effectively pull power from the critic and make that other voice less in control. And so you can practice this by just imagining it in your head, or I think it's particularly powerful, and the research shows it's particularly powerful to actually write out the compassionate thoughts, because that helps encode them in your mind even more. So I used to have a little journal. I would bring it on the subway when I was riding to the
mm,
office, and I would dialogue with my critic in my head, and always in my notebook, and always make sure that I gave the compassionate, constructive voice the last word. And then once you say that constructive thing to yourself, I like to say shift to from what if to what is. So from what if I'm not
mm.
good enough? What if they all hate me? What if I fail? To what is the most constructive next step that I can take right now? And then that brings us into practical forward moving action. And that's the thing. Perfectionists lose so much time and energy to rumination and self flagellation and catastrophizing. And so if we can just learn how to show ourselves that compassion and quiet that fear and allay that fear a little bit by giving ourselves that feeling of internal safety, then we can get on with it, because we have a lot of work to do.
I love that so much. I I it's funny though. I will share something, which is that, once I often ask a question, we talk about your inner critic, and then we say, "When's a time that your inner critic really motivated you in a positive way? Can you think of one?" And the most powerful answer I ever heard was from a gentleman at a leadership, I was with a leadership team, and he said, "I had a heart attack, and part of my recovery was I had to get up and exercise
Mhm.
every day." And part of his inner critic his whole life had been that he was lazy and
Yep.
he wasn't good enough.
Yep.
And he said, That critic came back in my recovery, but it was what I needed because it got me up and it got me to the gym when I really didn't want to go. What do you make of that? I mean, is there a piece of it that we can retain in a productive way at all?
So it's interesting because what Kristen Neff's research shows is that people in the realm of like behavioral change, so literally healthy eating, exercise, people are more likely to succeed in their goals if they treat themselves with self compassion than self criticism. And they're more likely to succeed if they, I'm sorry, they're more, if there's a setback, they're more likely to get back on track with it. And so it's so interesting in the case of this person because I don't know if there was a way that he could have fueled himself to go, maybe there would be is there an approach that would not be the self-critic that could have gotten him to go? And was it really maybe more of a values-based motivation, like, "Oh my god, I could have just died, and now I need to do this because, like, I wanna be with my family," and these other things, and the critic was there too, but we haven't tried it without the credit. So that is my question, and again, there are many people who swear up and down that that is what motivates them, and all I know is that there is compelling research that shows that when we are in a state of intense stress, it causes the amygdala in our brain, which is the part of our brain that governs emotional reactivity, to become so inflamed that it consumes all of our brain processing power and it causes our rational brain, the prefrontal cortex that governs logical thought and thinking, to temporarily go quiet. So this sends us into amygdala hijack mode where we become consumed by our emotional reactivity or anxiety and we lose capacity for rational strategic thought. So yeah, maybe you become if you're shaming yourself or angsting yourself, you can get up and go to the gym. But can you produce quality legal work product in that state of amygdala hijacking? Maybe less so. And so that is I still think that and also over the long term because we are not there's something called hu it's a form of human motivation theory that says self-determination theory, it's a form of human motivation theory, I was just blanking on the name, that says that there's core components that fuel motivation, and so it's a sense of autonomy, relatedness, and mastery, and what they say is those are the core senses that fuel our motivation, and autonomy includes a sense of authenticity or feeling like you're doing something that connects with your values. And what they say is just like a Big Mac can fuel someone, it doesn't do so optimally or over the long term. Because if you only eat Big Macs, you're not going to have a lot of energy. You can temporarily fuel yourself with fear or shame. But if that is how you're trying to motivate yourself on a daily basis, it's going to burn a hole in your stomach really quick.
Right, you're not filling yourself back up, you're not recovering, you're not building that good juju that
Yeah,
you
and it's certainly
need.
not for if you're a marathon runner not trying to get through a single sprint, it's going to, I think, bottom out at some point. And also, there might have just been a more effective way of doing it all along that most people haven't even been courageous enough to test to give it a try.
Okay, I wanna talk about clients
Yes.
because clients are so tricky, right?
Yes.
And I think that for those of us who, we fear shame, we want control, all the things, clients are unpredictable. We can't control them. That's the nature of the relationship, in fact. What is your advice for people whose perfectionism is really zeroing in on a lack of boundaries and anxiety about serving clients? Or they may not even feel it, but their boss feels it, right? And
Yeah.
creates that kind of environment where if the client says jump, we jump.
So the thing is that there are the moments when something is a true emergency and we must jump 100 feet high for real instantaneously. In other instances, it's not actually necessary. And you know what? Again, the best partners out there know how to draw necessary boundaries with
Mhm.
clients when it is essential to do so. And again, you can do so in little ways. The problem of the legal profession is when you, and this actually could be applied in any workplace setting, when you are responding continuously at all hours, then people are expecting you to respond continuously at all hours.
Right.
There are firms and groups that shift the expectations slightly because at the end of the day, what those clients really want is the best possible outcome and work product. So if you can show that you have that, the other stuff, people will be more forgiving on that. So if we can learn to, again, move away from billable hours, move away from did you respond to me at 3 a.m. and shift the focus to are you delivering the highest possible quality work product? Are you doing such good work that I will forgive the fact that you don't respond at 3 in the morning? That will be possible, and it's the same for, like, it's funny, I was just at my law school reunion this past weekend, and I was speaking with my classmate who's a partner who talks about how she will take responsibility for the mistakes of her associates rather than tearing them apart vis-a-vis the client because she knows that the way to keep the best people on her team as opposed to the burn and churn method and to really mentor and grow them into being exceptional one-day partners themselves, there can't be that toxic
Yep.
perfectionist culture within the group. And so being able to fall on the sword or again, displease someone in one way because you know that your team won't be able to deliver the highest quality work product if they're all up until 4 a.m. every night waiting for a possible client email that could come in. So I think that being able to accept the discomfort of displeasing people short term in little ways to avoid larger discomfort and displeasing them in more important ways, that's a really, really important skill. And again, this applies to anyone. As I've been growing my own business, my own career, at first I said yes to absolutely everything. And I bent over backwards to please in every single way. And that, again, I quickly saw was the road to burnout and not actually doing the best possible work. And I was terrified once again to start drawing boundaries in certain ways, fearing that then people would just cast me away for someone who, would never say no in any way. And the opposite happened because I actually got better and people respected me more. And this is actually true for the most part. Again, I'm not talking about releasing professionalism or anything like that, but
No.
we're talking about, those times around the edges what we're doing and it makes such a difference. And this is something so what associates are always told is that the partners are your clients. So they're teaching client service from the beginning, even though associates aren't engaging with actual clients, the partners are the clients. And a conversation that I all have with associates is, well, I'm just kind of staying up until 1 a.m. every night in case an email comes in because what if someone emails and I need to be accessible? And what I say is, what I'm not saying is if your partner is like all hands on deck, something, or that something's coming down the pike, don't be like, oh no, it's my bedtime. That's not
Mhm.
gonna be good for you. It's not gonna be good for me. But if you have no reason to anticipate that something is coming to you tonight, I highly encourage you to say, I'm gonna be logging off at this time unless there's anything you need from me. So you're not just kind of burning your
Well,
energy.
and what you're also doing there, which is so crucial, is you're setting an expectation and asking for clarity. I mean, so much of what drives burnout is actually stupid assumptions that we don't bother to check.
Well, I'm glad you said that because what I truly believe is the case for most people, again, working at the most demanding big law firms, yes, they are actually living in a cage of pretty intense constraints and requirements by virtue of their job. However, I would say that 99, if not 100% of them, not 100%, 99% are living in a much smaller cage of their own making because they are too scared to even test certain boundaries that they have assumed are necessary. And because of that, they just keep living in that smaller cage where there's actually subs considerable space between their cage and the actual cage. And when we are talking about things like sleep or social connection or movement or little aspects of the non-negotiable elements of self-care, a teeny change could make a world of difference in terms of your well-being and your performance. And so what I often people come to me and they're like, "I'm just so burnt out, I need to quit my job." And I say, "Okay, don't quit your job yet. Why don't we," because I don't like anybody to operate heavy machinery or make, big life decisions when they're in a state of total flight or flight or burnout because they can't even think clearly. So what I usually will recommend is, well, have you tried drawing any of these sort of boundaries to try to protect your well-being a little bit more? And usually they'll say no. And I say, well, what do you have to lose? What if we try to make some shifts first to see if they're possible? And if they are, and then that could be a situation that you want to be in, terrific. And this is for people if they're like, "Oh, I just hate my job. I wanna leave." Anyways, it's like, "Okay, yes, this isn't right for you." Great. But if they're like, "This is something I wanted for these reasons," well, why don't you give it a shot? Worst case scenario, if they say, "No, no, no, you can't do these things. You have to go." It's like, "All right, well, you wanted to go anyways." But a lot of people are actually surprised by how many little micro shifts they can make that
Right.
actually make a major difference.
My friend Callie Yost, just a plug for anyone listening, wrote a book called Tweak It. And this
Ooh,
is yeah, and it's exactly that. And she likens it to, when you come in to quit your job because something isn't working for you, asking for a divorce without even having a conversation or trying couples counseling,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And in most cases, your boss doesn't want you to leave.
Absolutely, and it's so interesting. It aligns with what Brené Brown says too, which is that boundaries are the bridge to better relationships or more sustainable relationships because so many people pleasers, they're too scared to draw boundaries that then they just hit their limit and explode and ask for the divorce because
Right.
asking for the divorce seems easier than having a conversation about, "It really bothers me when you do this.
Yeah.
Could you do this instead?" That feels so scary that we wait until we just need to blow the whole thing up. And and yes, there's so many I mean, again, if you are quality talent, your boss will want to keep you and will recognize that you provide this value that is more than just literally constant accessibility.
Right. Then staying up till 1 in the morning just in case. Yeah.
Exactly. And the sad thing is that a lot of people prevent themselves from even being able to show that extra value because they're so scared or they're so overextended and burned out.
Jordana, I'm gonna leave it there because this was so helpful, and, thank you very much for your work and your time.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for your work and everything that you are doing to empower and liberate anxious achievers everywhere. And it was a true honor to have this conversation with you, Maura.